So the idea of other dimensional entities manipulating human society, it's beyond their sense of the possible. It's beyond their sense of normal. But to understand, like I say, the power rings and the rings, you've got to understand who's actually orchestrating this whole control and dystopia of humanity. And it's in another dimension of reality. And when I was uncovering the nature of this cult in the early 1990s, a long time ago now, and I was starting to track and investigate various people that were clearly part of it, where it led me again and again was to Peter and then you ask the obvious question: why? Why would they be involved in that? There were so many of them. And then you think, okay, so what is Satanism? Well, it's worship of these, quote, gods. Well, who are these gods? Because these people are deeply sick, but in an intellectual sense, they're not freaking stupid, not those in the inner core anyway. So they're not going to worship gods that don't exist. They're just simply not going to do it. They leave that to the population. So they then I started looking back, and I started to see that all over the world, every era and culture worshipped pantheons of gods everywhere. So you see things like the Greek pantheon, Zeus and so on, and you say, okay, I've heard of that, but they're everywhere. But they're everywhere under different names, because different communities, different cultures, obviously call these gods different names. And then you look again and you say, well, they were sacrificing people to these gods. Actually, they were sacrificing overwhelmingly children, sacrificing young virgins to the gods. Anyone think what that might be code for? And then you ask the question, well, the first question, before you ask that question, you realize that the gods that these ancients all over the world were doing human sacrifices to are the same gods that the elite today are doing human sacrifices to. And then you ask the question, like I say, so you're making offerings to the gods. What do the gods get out of it? And then big pennies start to drop. The whole banking system start to drop when you realize that these entities in this astral dimension, which interpenetrates ours, are feeding off low vibrational human energy. It's well known by mainstream science that every time we think, every time we feel emotion, we generate an energy, a frequency. And that frequency relates to the nature of the thought and the nature of the emotion. And so joy, love, appreciation, these are high, fast frequencies. But these entities are low vibrational in nature. That's why they do what they do. And so for them to absorb our energy, they need low vibrational frequencies that relate to fear, anxiety, depression, regret, hatred, conflict, war. And so these entities, via this global code, have no interest whatsoever in a world of love, a world of joy, a world of harmony and peace. they want all the things that generate these low vibrational energies. And long after I'd realized all this, I came across the work of a guy called Robert Monroe of the Monroe Institute is now what he created and left. And Robert Monroe was someone who popularized what's called out-of-body experiences. It's when you have near-death experiences, when people, the body dies briefly and people find themselves in a completely different reality, and then the body is revived and they come back. And they tell very compellingly common tales. But out-of-body experience is when you are able to project your consciousness into the astral dimension. And Robert Monroe was so good at it that there was a military operation which was declassified by the CIA a little while ago, and it was called Gateway. And what they did is got together Robert Monroe and other people who had this astral projection ability, and they did a study on them and what they saw. And they went into the they would project into this astral dimension and then come back and say what they saw, and it would all be written down. You can go on the internet, put in Gateway Project Robert Monroe, and you'll see the background. And they saw in the astral so many reptilian entities that they actually gave them a name in the Gateway Project, the alligators. And in this same period too, of 35 years, I've come across people all over the world who have experienced these reptilian entities, sometimes in the astral, sometimes in the human, and have seen people, apparently human to start with, change into a reptilian figure, and then often go back again. And I've been putting this together, this evidence together now since 1996. And I've talked to hundreds of people who have had this experience from all walks of life and backgrounds. And then you look at the ancient tales from the ancient societies, and they're telling the same story of reptilian entities. I mean, the worship of the reptile is the oldest form of known human worship, going back tens of thousands of years. So you have these entities operating overwhelmingly in the astral, but they can move into our dimension. And I've said many times that every child should be told at the earliest time they can grasp it, that when they look through their eyes, they're not seeing everything that exists in the space they're looking at. They're seeing a narrow band of frequency. And anything outside that band of frequency that's operating in the same space, they can't see, which is why we can't see the astral. So according to mainstream science, the electromagnetic spectrum, which is basically human experience reality, is 0.005% of what exists in the universe in terms of energy in its different forms. Some say it's as high as 0.5. Doesn't matter, it's tiny. Visible light, which is the only band of frequency that we can see, everyone watching this now is seeing within that visible light frequency, is a smear of the 0.005%. So humans are basically blind because this vehicle will only decode that frequency band, which is why that's all we can see. So when a UFO or an entity enters visible light, to the observer, it's appeared out of nowhere. And when it goes out of visible light, it just disappeared into nowhere. Neither has happened. It's left the band of frequency that we can decode into visual reality. So that's why, that's the answer to the question you get asked all the time over the years. Well, if these reptilians exist, why can't we see them? Well, they do appear in this reality, and people have talked about them and their experiences with them, but overwhelmingly they're operating outside of human visible light, the visible frequency band. So they are feeding off this low vibrational human energy. That's what Robert Monroe and others in the Gateway Project, and others who have done the same, who I've spoken to, that's what they say they ascertained in the astral dimension. And there's lots and lots and lots of more evidence in the human world for what I'm talking about as well, which I've covered in the books. And so we have to keep being manipulated into low vibrational emotional and mental states to produce what Robert Monroe called loosh, this low vibrational energy for these entities. Because when someone's in a low vibrational, anxious, fearful state, you can see it on their face, you can see it in their body language. What you can't see outside visible light is the energy they're giving off as a result of those mental and emotional states, because that energy is going into the astral dimension. That's why we can't see it. And they're feeding off it. The more turmoil, war, conflict, suffering, deprivation, the better. That's why the world is as it is and always has been. Imagine the bloody banquet that's happening day after day in bloody Gaza as a result of these people.
Is that why Boris Johnson scuppered the peace deal with Ukraine and we've had over 1 million Ukrainians die, blood sacrificed?
Well, in terms of Boris Johnson, I mean, you know, is there life on Boris Johnson? I see no evidence. He might have been a vehicle for it, and in some ways he will maybe know some levels of this, but he's a gopher. All these politicians are gophers for this cult. They don't put themselves on public display. They're the orchestrators. Last thing they want to do. So then we go back then to the sacrifice, the satanic rituals. Why were they sacrificing to the gods in the ancient world? And then when it became unacceptable to the population, they do it secretly ever since. What do the gods get out of it? Well, they get out of it low vibrational energy of a very powerful kind. I've talked to people all over the world again who have taken part in these rituals, often against their will, and sometimes eventually they've seen the bloody light. And they tell me, first of all, that the rituals are basically ancient rituals, which they still repeat today, because it has the vibrational energetic impact and which they want, and so why would you change it? They've told me how in the major rituals that these non-human entities, often reptilian, but not always, but non-human, manifest in the rituals, because a lot of these rituals, especially the major ones, take place on the vortex points. You know, we have this ley line system, which is part of a much greater universal system of energetic lines and electrical, electromagnetic forces. And where these lines cross, where two lines cross, you get a little vortex. And where massive number of lines cross, you get a massive vortex. And what these vortexes do, the big ones, is they thin out the energetic frequency difference between the human reality and the astral reality, which allows these entities, not necessarily for very long, but to slip through this conduit into the ritual. And so what are they doing? They are terrifying the victim. Imagine you're a little bloody kid going through this. These people have no empathy. They're just software programs. They have no what we would call human emotion. That's why they do what they do. They're psychopaths. You look at the super psychopaths. You look at the so-called hair test of a psychopath, named after the guy that basically invented it. The hair test is a list of traits, and if you have enough of them, you're a psychopath. And the top two traits: lack of empathy, unable to put yourself in the situation you're making other people suffer, and lack of compassion, deleted compassion, no compassion. These people are literally software programs. And if you put a software program in a computer and you tell it to do something, it will do it. It won't say, well, hold on a minute, mate. No, it will just do it. This is what these people are. They're software programs. And so they're terrifying the victim. And terror is a very, very powerful low vibrational energy. And while the Satanists in our reality are conducting the ritual, these entities, I guess almost all of them don't manifest, one or two do, but they're in this astral dimension, overseeing it, sharing the same space. And as the terror comes off the victim, they're feeding off it. And this is happening all over the world. You know, this satanic calendar with its Beltane and its Halloween and so many others in between, rituals, days, it's real. And these people do it. Now, if you are going to sacrifice a little for your gods, prats, then are you going to have any questioning of creating wars that are going to cause such death and destruction and suffering and turmoil and sadness? No. Why? Because you want them. Are you going to have any compassion for children in Gaza? No, none. You're just going to do it because you have no ability to empathize or to feel compassion. You're a software program. And this is the basis of the reason they do it. Is the reason it goes from the ancient world right into the modern times, because they are making offerings to the same gods the ancients were. They just call them different names. You can call it the cult of BAAL. It's just another bloody name. They're talking about these entities. And, you know, when what's the name, says that, you know, it's basically talking about shape-shifting reptilians and all that stuff, and what have you, is derailing the credibility of talking about this stuff. No, it's not. No, it's not. It's explaining why it happens. And in terms of shape-shifting, let's talk about that. Because, you know, what was said in that interview, in parts of it, does need challenging in this metaphysical impossibility. To really understand what's happening in the world and what the world is, we have to realize that physicality is an illusion. And quantum physics, as it's emerged and expanded, has understood this. We are told that the physical world consists of atoms. Atoms make up the solid physical world. Well, if you look at the inside of an atom and go deeply enough into it, there is no physicality. It's just an electrical system of electrons going around a nucleus. And as someone said to illustrate what an atom really is, if the nucleus at the center of the atom was a 10-cent piece, then the atom itself would have to be the size of a baseball stadium. And everything else is empty space. It's not empty, it's an energy that we're not aware of, but to the human vision, it's empty space. And that's supposed to make up the physical world. It doesn't. So what the heck is going on? Why are we being told all the time by orthodox science funded by the cult, you want to go beyond what we want people to believe? Well, funding stopped, mate. It tells us that we live in a physical world and everything's solid. Well, that is clearly, demonstrably not the case. And I just talk about how this thing works. We, in our non-human body state, are consciousness. Some people call it soul. Actually, we go beyond that even, but call it soul, whatever you like. It's consciousness. When a near-death experiencer, the body ceases to function and they find themselves in another reality, well, obviously they're not taking their body with them, have they? It's just expired. So what's experiencing that? Well, another level of energy is, which people call the soul. And so the body is a vehicle. It's a vehicle for us to experience this reality, this band of frequency, which is the human world. And so when the body expires, we find ourselves in another dimension. Why? Because the reason we've been experiencing this dimension is because the body is decoding it. If you could think of the body as a virtual reality headset, then you pretty much got the dynamic. You put into YouTube words to the effect of virtual reality headset compilations or whatever, and you will see many videos of people who put a headset on. Now they're in a room, maybe just like any other room, and they're in this reality. But you put the headset on, and within seconds, they're jumping around, screaming, running away, because their sense of reality has been hijacked, overridden by what the headset is feeding them. And what is it feeding? It's feeding their 5 senses. It's feeding their sight, it's feeding their audio, and in the more sophisticated ones, it's feeding their touch. And even with some of these chairs that move around, it's giving them the feeling of movement as well in relation to what they're being fed in the headset. And what they can do, because it's a headset, is they can take it off. And immediately they go, phew, well, oh, it was just a game. But if the body, which I've been calling since the 1990s a biological computer, is decoding this reality, which is a simulation, the dynamic of a virtual reality game is very applicable. Then from the moment you're in the womb and the body starts to form to the moment you go out the other end in the cemetery, the biological computer is decoding this reality in exactly the way in dynamics that this computer is decoding the internet. So if you said to people who knew nothing about computers and nothing about Wi-Fi, that there is a level of energy, information in this room and around the world that you can, that is a global reality, the internet is, and that you can decode it into a completely different reality on the screen, then people would call you mad and crazy. They'd say, well, where is this Wi-Fi? I can't see it. No, because it's outside of visible light. And yet, now people know about computers and they know about Wi-Fi. And you say, you know, there's a whole reality which you can decode into a completely different form on the computer screen. People say, oh, yeah, I know about that. Wi-Fi, the computers, yeah, know about that. And the only difference between your mad mate and, oh, yeah, I know about that, is knowledge. Knowledge that Wi-Fi and computers exist. Now, what is a computer doing? It's taking a field of information called Wi-Fi, and it's decoding it into a completely different state on the screen. My face is not in the Wi-Fi. Information the computer decodes as my face is in the Wi-Fi. And where is the computer decoding the Wi-Fi? Is it here? Is it here? Is it here? No, it's inside the computer. And what's kind of really struck me over recent times, decades now, is how the technological explosion that we're seeing in the world mirrors the way we interact with reality and what reality is. So you take a Wi-Fi field, that in the greater scheme it's the simulation. The simulation is not a construct, it's a field of information. And it's like, if you remember in the first Matrix movie, the Morpheus character held up a battery and he said, the Matrix, simulation, the Matrix is a computer-generated dream world built to turn human beings into one of these, a battery. And that was a profound truth within apparently a fictional movie, because this is a simulated reality which we take to be real. And as a result of what happens in this reality and our interaction with this reality, we generate this massive amount of low vibrational energy, loosh, which these entities feed off. And so you have the body and it's constantly decoding the matrix. And it's doing it through the five senses, which is why the virtual reality games can override the five senses and give you a different reality, which you react to before you do that. And you've only got to look at mainstream science to see the sequence. What's happening is the simulation field is held in the form of frequency. frequency carries information. And I mean, you get the frequencies of television broadcasts in the old analog system. They broadcast the frequency, and the television decoded the frequency information into the television program you were looking at on the screen. It's the same principle. And so the five senses are locking in to this frequency information of the simulation. And the five senses, the ears are a classic. That's frequency information. Everyone knows that, sound waves. But it's all frequency information, including sight. And the five senses then communicate that frequency information, having decoded it into electrical information, and they communicate it to the brain. And there's different parts of the brain that specialize in decoding the different senses. And then the brain forms a sense of reality from that information. And it's a digital holographic reality, which we experience as external to us. I grant you that's what it looks like, but actually it's all going on in here, just as it's all going on in the computer as I'm looking at it here. And if you look at it, everything is frequency. All of it's frequency, which is decoded into other forms that we experience as human reality. I'm speaking now, and people are hearing my words, but there's not words that are passing between us. It's frequency. My vocal cords are generating a frequency field. And that frequency field passes through the ether until it hits the ears. And they decode that frequency field into electrical information, which is fed to the brain, and the brain then decodes it into the words that we hear. And everything is frequency decoded by the body into the sense of reality that we're experiencing. So when you die, you don't die. You are consciousness. You are infinite, eternal consciousness, or expression of it anyway in this reality. What dies is the body. And what happens then? The body ceases to function, and it ceases to decode this reality. So suddenly your consciousness finds yourself in another reality, what we call a near-death experience. And so death is just the death of the body. If this computer ceases to function and the screen goes black, what do we say? My computer's died. Exactly. It stopped decoding the internet onto the screen. That's all death is. But they want us frightened of death and fearful of death and in terror of death, because that, well, produces more loose for a start. So everything is a field of energy, information, including the body, ultimately, which we are decoding into a physicality, a holographic physicality. You look at holograms now, where they are getting so sophisticated that you can often not even tell them, and soon the people involved in that say you won't be able to tell the difference between reality that you say is real and holographic reality, because this is all holographic, because it's all going on in here. And so what we're doing when we look at anything is we're looking at a field of information, and that field of information is decoded frequency into a physical reality within here. And so when you're looking at someone who looks human, what you're looking at is a field of information that we call human. But these non-human entities that infiltrate our world, they're hybrids. They have a human field and they have a non-human field. And obviously the human field is the one that's projected at the world most of the time, unless they're among their own. And so you look at someone with a human field, or that level of the hybrid that is the human field, and you will see a human. But when that other field, reptilian or non-human of some form, becomes the dominant one and overrides the human field, to the observer, they have shifted from a human being, solid, into a non-human entity, solid. But that's your decoding process that's delivering that illusion. What has happened is that a field of information carries the human genetic field, if you like, has been overridden by a non-human field. And it's the same principle as when, like I said, the UFO comes into visible light. It appears out of nowhere and it leaves visible light and it disappears into nowhere. Well, it hasn't disappeared at all. It's just entered visible light and left. And it's all this decoding illusion based on the frequency band that we are decoding into an apparently human world. And so shape-shifting, people say, you can't go from a solid body to another solid body. No, you can't. No, you can't. I'm the first one to say, of course you can't. But that's not what's happening. What's happening is a field of information that's been overridden by another field of information in these hybrid bloodlines. And to the observer, there's been a physical shift, but it's not a physical shift. It's a shift of information, which means a shift in the information decoded and therefore the way it appears to the observer. And shape-shifting has been talked about for as long as humanity's been around, really. The old ancients and the shamans of the ancient world were talking about all this stuff. And when you talk to the number of people that I have about their experiences, and all walks of life and backgrounds, extraordinary stories that I've been told by different people, that they've experienced this, seeing this shift from one form to another, then to write it off as drugs. People are drugged, and they want them to think that they're shape-shifting reptilians. Well, she should have been with me for the last 35 years and seen all the undrugged people that have told me their stories. This thing is real. And like I say, we need to understand this non-human dimension, which is driving all this, to understand why they do the rituals, why they do the because people are overwhelmingly possessed people. And so these entities, astral entities, they override. They don't necessarily have to possess them the entire time, but at the appropriate time, shall we say, they'll come in and they'll override the energy field of the. And when the people is the entity, overriding entity, operating in the astral, is drawing off the energy of the child. There is a point, of course, that we call puberty. And puberty appears to be a chemical hormonal transformation. And yes, on one level it is. But what's driving that transformation is an energetic information change transformation that happens at that point in the development of a human. And these entities, for whatever reason, want that energy before puberty happens. This is why they are obsessed with children. This is why people are attracted on a scale that beggars belief. See, when I first started coming across this in the 90s, it wasn't the fact that it was happening that shocked me, because if it's possible, then someone will be doing it. The scale of it is what shocked me. And people are just starting to grasp a little bit of what the scale is. It's bloody everywhere. And so what the entity is doing as it overrides the is it's drawing the energy of the child off. And I quote people, various shamans in my books, who talk about how these entities, which they give different names to depending on the culture, are drawing off this energy of children, so that the child's energy at the end of this process is far, far less vibrant and vivid than it was before, because they've basically taken their energy. And so this is what's happening. The people is actually a conduit to draw off the child's energy. And in the same way, you've got the rituals, and overwhelmingly, they are sacrificing, because again, they're drawing off that energy pre-puberty. And, you know, we're kind of light years beyond Trump or Harris, where the mainstream alternative media, Trump or Harris, it's a Democrats. Look where we are. And I'm covering just a tiny fraction of what I've uncovered in the last 35 years, which gives you a completely different perspective on the world and why what happens in the world is happening and is being made to happen. Now, why do they want us fused with AI? What is AI? Okay, algorithmic AI, yeah, okay, one level. And then there's other AI, that's another level. But what is the AI that they want to connect us to, really? It's these entities. It's a frequency connection to these entities. And at that point, those entities are doing our thinking and they're doing our emotional reaction. And if you want to generate maximum, quote, loosh, then you want control of what people think and what people emotionally feel. And that's the real reason. They want to create a hive mind where they can centrally dictate human thought and emotion through AI and this AI connection, this AI fusion. And so people like Ray Kurzweil at Google, the so-called futurist, who claims to be the person alive today who's been talking about this for longest, he says that by 2030, he said this a few years ago, by 2030, humans will be fused with artificial intelligence, connected to it. It's already happening. And that once that connection is made, the AI will be doing more and more, his words, the AI will be doing more and more of human thinking until human thinking is negligible. In other words, deleted. And at that point, we become AI terminals on an AI internet. Now, what's the conduit? What's the conduit, this AI connection? Well, it's an electromagnetic field. We call it the cloud. That's what Kurzweil talks about. He says we'll be connected to the cloud in 2030 onwards. So you can create this cloud, this electromagnetic, technologically generated cloud of information, the conduit through which you can flow your frequencies of AI to the human mind. But you're still not going to cover the entire planet that way with the cloud, the technologically generated cloud. To really cover the whole planet, you need low orbit satellites. Well, who's putting up tens of thousands of low orbit satellites? SpaceX and Elon Musk. Who's coming on behind? Amazon and Jeff Bezos with the same thing. And the idea is that you connect to humans via this cloud. You're putting in frequencies in this cloud, which the human body is decoding. But to really do that powerfully, you need a receiver in the body, preferably in the brain, to pick up those frequencies. And how does the brain think? What's the process? It's electrical. Neurons fire. The brain is electrical in the way that it works. And if you can mess with the electrical interaction within the brain, you mess with the perceptions of that person. And there's another thing that graphene is famous for, and that is that it amplifies electromagnetic fields. So if you come into contact with an electromagnetic field, if you've got graphene in the body, it will amplify the effect of that field on the body. Perfect if you're talking about the cloud. And now they're starting to move the so-called mRNA system into other vaccines. And if you look at those that have investigated deeply the chemtrails coming out of aircraft, not contrails, which disperse quickly, but contrails, which pan out and fall to Earth eventually. I think geoengineering.org, I think, is a real front runner in this. And they've talked to whistleblowers within the government departments in America that relate to chemtrails. And they say there's graphene in the chemtrails. But what they're saying is it's not officially acknowledged because they don't test at the nano level that the graphene exists in. And you look at all these different sources of graphene, and they're bombarding us with it, but on a nano level. And the idea is that the hive mind, which I've been warning about for decades was the plan, delivers the frequencies of the hive mind, and the graphene and the other nano self-replicating material picks it up and decodes it into the hive mind perception. And you know, there's I said earlier that we are consciousness. And there's a level of us that we call mind, which is an electromagnetic field, which the brain processes. Consciousness doesn't come from the brain, it comes through the brain. But we are part of an infinite field of information, knowledge, awareness, consciousness. To control us, this non-human force within this multi-leveled matrix. The astral's part of this matrix. I'll go into in my books. They need to disconnect this incarnate level of awareness from that infinite level of awareness. And one of the big ways they do it is to focus your attention. They want your focus of attention on the 5 sense world. Because what you know, if I look into this room, then I'm seeing the room. But if I do that and focus on that, the room's disappeared. I can just see that finger. And what they want us is in that mode. So we're so focused on the 5 sense world that it's all exists, that we lose the panorama. So we don't see how the dots connect because we're too busy focusing on that. And so they have to disconnect the influence of expanded levels of consciousness with incarnate consciousness that's experiencing through the body, briefly. And so what they've been working on over the decades and the hundreds of years and thousands of years is doing just that. But what they want is to stop that happening at all. Because you'll see in the world, there are different levels of awareness. People have different levels of awareness. Some have very expanded awareness. Some have very myopic awareness because they're tapping into different levels of their multi-level field, multi-dimensional field. What this force wants is to hold them in a smaller area of the field as possible. The one that directly experiences through the 5 senses is the ideal. Because once you start realizing that you are not your body, that you are not human, that you are consciousness having a brief experience as a human through this body which decodes the world of human, the more you expand your awareness and your self-identity of who you really are, consciousness, eternal infinite consciousness, the more you expand and expand and expand into greater and greater swathes of the field. And eventually you break out of this prison matrix, which is a perceptual prison. And you start to then see things you couldn't see before. What do we call this? We call it awakening. True awakening. Not awakening where your prison cell gets slightly bigger. Oh, it's the Democrats that are the deep state. You're still in a prison cell. But when you break through that into a self-identity that not just understands conceptually, but lives, I am consciousness, then you start breaking into these levels of awareness that hold the information where you can see things that others can't see, not because you're better than them, but because they're here, because that's what their perception is. I'm just a human. I'm just the labels of human, or I'm subject to some judgmental God. Either way works. But when you start to expand your awareness, you start to see it. It becomes clear to you. You start to be able to encompass things, metaphysical things happening in the world that others will reject by reflex action. What they want to do is stop that happening. So how do you start that happening? What's the process? You start to ask the big questions. Who am I? Where am I? What is this place? What am I doing here? And you start to expand your questions into the big questions. You start to access big answers. Now, does anyone think that when or if we allow AI to become the human mind, to become the human thought processes and the human emotional reactions, that AI will be asking on our behalf the big questions. Who am I? Where am I? What am I doing here? No, of course not. It will just be conformity, unquestioning conformity. And without asking the big questions and pursuing them, you cannot break out of this consciousness myopia. And that's what connecting the human brain and body to artificial intelligence is all about. It's to stop anyone asking the big questions, or even asking questions like, why is this guy telling us what to do? I mean, who is this guy? No, you just do it. This is what it's about. We are on the cusp. And again, this is why I've been so vehement in my exposure and all the abuse that followed of this hijacked alternative media. It's because it's holding people in myopia. It's the Democrats, deep state. When without accessing this expanded level of awareness, which anyone can do, just have to break down the onion skins of programming. That's what it is. We are already infinite awareness. Reason we're not being influenced by it is because of all these layers of programming from cradle to bloody grave that we're subject to. Perceptual programming. So this is the real reason for the AI. And this is what Trump is a frontman for, bringing this in the United States and the wider world. Then you've got China pushing it on. You've got the European Union pushing it on. You've got Britain pushing it on. And what they've done, and this is all part of the perceptual process, is they've turned it into a race. Oh, we must get to the AI utopia first. We can't let China do it. No, we've got to take regulation off so that we get there before the Chinese. And Britain, Starmer says, oh, we want to be the center of AI, and the European Union says the same. And it's all bringing about this human artificial intelligence connection, which will be the end of humanity as we know it if we allow it to happen.
Well said, David. You've been very generous with your time, and I find some of this particularly terrifying because we've got a 1-year-old baby here, so we've got to protect him at all costs. Now,
well, that's an important point. That's an important point, because I've got kids and grandkids, and that's what drives me on. And not just my kids and grandkids, but everyone else's kids and grandkids. Your child. You know, this is why we've got to grow up. We've got to find some maturity. We've got to open our bloody minds, because it's closed minds that got us into this mess. Did anyone think that this cult wants open human minds? It wants closed human minds. And it's got people out there who are closing minds all over the place. You've got religions closing minds. If you believe in a religion, there's vast areas, whichever one it is, there's vast areas of potential awareness, knowledge, insight that you won't go there. You won't go there because it will breach the walls of your religious belief and a political belief, left, right, MAGA, whatever. You won't go somewhere else where insight, information might be beneficial to you, because you ain't going to leave your political belief system. We've got to put down these fault lines of division, these fault lines of, and these walls of perceptual programming here and no further, and open our minds to what's really going on. And I tell you, it's nothing like we think is going on.
David, can you tell the viewers where they can find you and follow you? I believe you're back on some of the platforms now, and what books or tours you've got coming up.
Well, I'm on X, Twitter X, because I can't not be, because the free speech absolutist image would be destroyed. But the others, I've still not got a channel on YouTube or anything like that. Though some people do post things sometimes on YouTube, and some get taken down, some get left. Davidike.com is my website, and we've got a media platform called Iconic, which does news programs virtually every day. Well, it does news programs every day, looking at the world from another angle, if you like. And also, we do full-length documentaries. I've done a few on the nature of reality and the nature of a lot of what we've been talking about today, Shaun. And I'm going to be talking in London. I think the details will be circulated soon. I've been asked to talk in London in October. And then I've got a new book out in a few months, which I think is the best thing I've done so far. It's just flowed onto the page, and there's some fantastic information in it. A lot of which has come while I've been writing it, which is really, it's like, whoa, another level. And I'll be doing a speaking tour in the new year around Britain. I have to be around Britain because I'm banned from 30 European countries and Australia and lots of other places if I try to get in them. I note the alternative media stars are not banned from those places, which is kind of, what are they saying or not saying that I am? But anyway, so I'll be doing that, and I will be doing what I'm doing to the day at some point I keel over, because the one thing, mate, I've not been able to understand over this 35 years is how I've seen people come and I've seen people go. They've been stars for and flavor of the month for a while, and then they've disappeared. Because once you have an inkling of what's happening and you see the scale and the depth of depravity of what's happening, not least to kids, then walking away is utterly unthinkable. And how people can come get a certain amount of information about what's happening, enough, and then say, oh, it's the kitchen's too hot, or I'm not doing this anymore. I can't understand that, because there's nothing more important than getting this information out. Why? And why the censorship? It's because we get our perceptions from information received. And these people want to control the information we receive, and thus people putting out information they don't want us to receive are dangerous and must be silenced and censored. That's how it works.
Thank you, David. I'm going to let you go, and I'm going to close the show.
Okay, mate.
But huge thank you for your time, and you take care. If there's anything we can do for you, just let us know. Thank you, David.
All right, mate. See ya. Bye.
Cheers. So, viewers, another phenomenal interview with David. Please support his work. All of his links are going to be in the description box below this video. I've been reading his books for decades. Absolutely phenomenal. I would urge people to go and see him. I've been to see him. And, throughout this interview, we referenced various things. Mark Epstein, David referenced, citing the cause of death of Jeffrey as not being self-unalivement. Well, we've interviewed Mark Epstein recently. I'll put the link in the description box for that one. And please let us know in the comments what you have thought about this interview. It's been a while since we interviewed David, and he did come under a lot of flack when Trump won the elections. He was out, David was outspoken, predicted certain things, and they've all come true. And now the detractors are scrambling to say, oh, it's because of this or because of that. Poppycock. David has called it right, and don't listen to him at your peril. So thanks for tuning in, folks.